because Liam is very sound and robust when it comes to such issues as I am, and I'm sure that he will have a view on this too. Liam, I must say, I was a bit upset with Reform UK today. They've come out publicly saying they will oppose these measures. It feels to me this is opposing for the sake of opposing, something Labour did when they were in opposition in the last government, rather than just saying, you know what, this isn't perfect, but you know what, it's a damn sight better than where we are now. Am I fair in my criticism, or is there a good reason why Reform should oppose these measures?
It's a difficult one because, as you quite rightly say, it's a step in the right direction. But I think Reform have bloody good reason to be highly sceptical of this. They have been shouting from the sidelines for not years but decades about the broken nature, the fundamentally broken nature of our asylum system. And not only have they been ignored, but they have been, criticised and libelled and called racist and bigoted at every single turn for raising these fundamental questions, logical points about the broken nature of the incentives and the unfeasibility of it all. So I don't really blame them for being highly sceptical. I think I do think Shabana Mahmood means some of what she says, but I think most people in the Labour Party are highly cynical. And as you got to later in your points there, it's highly unlikely that any of this will be able to be implemented. So I'm kind of on the fence about this. I do think this change should go ahead, but I do think there are good reasons for Reform to be sceptical. And I think I'll allow them the space and the time to explain that. But I like the way you set up the question at the beginning. Should we trust Labour now to reform immigration? Because what they've done is they've admitted the first principles of our asylum system are broken and it's logically incoherent. It always has been. Okay, we have to remember that. Why is it that you come here, you get awarded 5 years in asylum, and that 5 years just happens to coincidentally align with exactly the time you're allowed to apply for indefinite leave to remain? The asylum system, the offer of asylum in this country has never been what its proponents have told us it is. They have said that it is there to keep people safe from war and that it's a temporary thing. It's never been that way. The way the law is set up is it's automatically a permanent route to permanent settlement in this country. So you get people coming to this country that didn't choose to be here, don't want to be here, some of them, as we know, but they get this permanent settlement, and it's led to a perverse immigration system. So Shabana Mahmood has gone back to first principles and said, actually, the principles of our asylum system are completely illogical, and we need to start again. And actually, I think a lot of people reading this, in fact, that don't follow the news so closely, will be shocked that this ever needed to be done in the first place, that our asylum system was ever like this to begin with. It was always just a permanent, automatically from day one. And as soon as you got granted asylum, it was permanently you were on the track to near certainty to staying here forever. And I think actually some people will be shocked that that was ever the case. So in some ways it's welcome. In some ways it's completely obvious that they needed to do this. And then you get onto the second bit. Well, will they be able to implement it? And as you quite rightly say, what this means is that, well, currently she said that in 20 years, you won't get leave to remain for 20 years. So in 20 years' time, we will be able to deport you if your country is safe. Can you imagine how many claims within the ECHR? People are here for 5 minutes and they cook up about 5 different reasons under the ECHR rules. And it is, I've converted to a different religion, or I've got a job, my son won't eat certain foods. Can you imagine the nebulous list of claims they're going to have after 20 years? So it's completely plausible to say as well that, yes, it's great that she's rethinking the first principles, but none of the steps have been taken to actually make this possible to implement in real terms when you look at how our civil service works, how the illegal establishment works, and how that big network of establishment vested interests that work to keep people here against the interest and the democratic will of the British people. None of those details have been changed to actually make this implementable.
Yeah.
One of the craziest things that I was sort of in mixed feelings when I was listening to her speaking yesterday, because part of me was thinking, wow, brilliant, logic. Like all these things that we've been saying for years, we've got a Home Secretary up there. And part of me was just kind of really angry because I've had these conversations in private and on air that we just need to change it. We need to change the rules. And so many people, and many of them Tories, our lad, have looked me dead in the eye and said, it's simply impossible. It's impossible. And then you get one, and I've always said that it's not impossible. The key problem here is willing. it is willing by our political establishment to confront the civil servants around them, to change the legal establishment, and actually implement the democratic will of this country. And I remember back in 2015, when the Syrian war was peaking, and we had 1 million people enter Germany in just a few months. And I remember speaking to Tories then, saying, you know, this 1 million people will be in Europe forever. That we can invite them in and say we're going to protect them from this temporary war, but they're going to be here forever. And I remember speaking to Tories then, saying we need to change the system so as soon as the war stops and you get a stable situation in Syria, we can return these people. Or otherwise you're misleading voters, because you're inviting 1 million people in to stay permanently in Germany, and a large number came here. And then even back then they were saying, no, that's impossible. This is the post-war settlement that we have. We simply can't change it. And then in a day, we get a Home Secretary with the willing, and as you say, the balls to stand up and say it. And part of me is happy. Part of me is just so frustrated, because I've had these conversations so many times. And we have to ask ourselves why it took a Labour politician to do it. And I think this speaks to the cowardice of a lot of Conservative politicians today.
Agreed.
And you have to ask yourselves why we end up with Conservatives that are so unwilling and so scared to confront some of the most fundamental right-wing issues, or the biggest issues of concerns to right-wing voters. And it's because we've lost the cultural debate. Conservatives always have these strong views, but they're almost more scared of seeming mean and being confrontational and of their own reputation. And it took a Labour politician to stand up and do it. And you have to draw parallels with things like, a bit of a tangent here, but Conservatives have been muzzled. They have been silenced, and you have to draw parallels with things like the rape gang scandal, where people were too scared to talk about any issue that was adjacent to immigration, race, and ethnicity. They were too scared to talk about it because the accusations would fly. And you saw that again with the murder of this poor Muslim girl recently, where social services and the neighbours were too scared to report it to social services because they'd be accused of racism. And I think this expands to actually any issue that is to do with immigration and to do with ethnicity, where Conservatives were too scared to confront this for so long because they'd be called mean, they'd be called the nasty party, when actually, in reality, the kind thing to do is to rewrite the system so we can give asylum to people that genuinely need it, not the fit young men breaking into our country. But they were too fearful. And that brings us back to the importance of free speech. Free speech in this country. I think there has been a sort of a silencing of the majority for too long, where we haven't been able to have a frank conversation about this, and Conservatives are more guilty than anyone else. And here we are, where it took a Labour politician to stand up and actually speak some truth on it. So I don't think she's done what is necessary to actually implement this, but I'm so glad she is talking about these first principles and making the points that should have been made decades ago.
Liam, out of interest, do you think she could win a Labour leadership contest? I'm sceptical, because I think that the Labour Party membership, and that's the voter base that would take place in a leadership contest, would never pitch to someone on the right. And I think she knows she's basically sacrificed her leadership ambitions to do what's right for the country in terms of what she's saying. I suspect she may enter the contest in order to try and basically keep the Labour Party on track. But ultimately, any leadership contest is going to pitch the soft left. Ironically, the real threat to this policy might be Sir Keir Starmer going.
Yeah. I mean, that's one way of looking at it, that she is doing what she thinks is right above the interests of the party. Or there's another way of looking at it, that there is a fight for the heart and soul of the Labour Party right now. And people like Maurice Glassman have been saying for a long time that reform are actually much closer to what the Labour Party should always have been. And that the Labour Party has basically been overrun by university educated, public sector workers, liberally minded middle class people. And it's never should have been that. And maybe there will be a fight for the heart and soul of the Labour Party. My bet, if that happens, would be on Nigel Farage, because he's been entirely consistent for 20 years. And why would you put your bet on the Labour Party transforming into something that it's not been for 50 years?
But Liam, out of interest, sorry, just to say here, the Times have then done polling, kind of backing up what you're saying here. YouGov survey, 2,100 people found that 23% of Labour voters think the Prime Minister should quit now and allow the party to elect a new leader. And a further 22% think he should stand down at some point before the next election. Over half of Labour voters think Keir has to go.
Well, I'll tell you, 20 minutes in the pub and I could have told you that for free. Um, just talking to my neighbours. I don't think I've met anyone recently out here in the real world. I live in the countryside. Who hasn't told me that they think Keir Starmer should step down immediately. But it was some really interesting polling. All the same, it's always good to have these things confirmed in data. But there were some other interesting things from that. 29% of voters overall said that the Tories were more competent than this Labour administration, and over half said that Labour were either more divided than the Conservatives. And
it's quite an achievement, isn't it? After 16 months.
Yeah. I mean, the reason that people elected this Labour government, and I think the first bit of polling shows that they want Keir to go, is that they never really wanted a Labour government. They just wanted something different. And then those second questions that I've just revealed there shows that they were betrayed, because the only things that they were hoping out of this Labour government is they'd be a little bit more calm and competent than the sort of tumultuous Tory government that we had. And here they are saying, actually, no, they're even worse. So I feel sorry for the voters.
Well, Liam, what was it we were told by Andrew Marr? We're going to, on Question Time, we're going to have a period of calm, stability. We're going to have the grown-ups in charge. We heard it all from the liberal elite inside the SW1 bubble, and lo and behold, look where we are today. Liam, you stay on the line. I know you're going to be joining us after the break. Listeners, you know what to do. Tell us what you think. If Labour sorts out the issue of immigration, would you give them a second chance and elect them as a government? 0344 499 1000 is how you WhatsApp, call and voice note. 87222 is how you text us, the word talk at the start of your message. And of course, you can message and follow us on X at TalkTV. We'll see you after the break. In Great Britain, Jonathan Gullis in again here for the great Ian Collins on the home of common sense. That is Talk. Still joining me down the line, Liam Deacon, ex-head of press for the Brexit Party and comms supremo. If anyone's out there looking for work, I don't know if I'm allowed to tout you, Liam, but I'll probably get told by the bosses afterwards, but I'll take my chances. Certainly knows what he's doing. Look, Liam, I actually should say, not to comment from you if that's okay, but just to respond to you, because you were right. You were mentioning the Conservatives quite there, and yesterday I had the same feelings as you. I was liking a lot of what I was hearing. I was sceptical about it ever happening, but most importantly, I actually felt angry because I was there going, why in 14 years did we, the Conservative Party, vacate the field of play? Why in that parliament that I was part of, where we had an 80-seat majority, why were we not doing this alongside Rwanda? And I was amazed when I text ex-colleagues of mine and some current MPs who were saying to me, oh, but we had the pandemic. Oh, but we had Rwanda and we were being blocked every turn. No, that's a pathetic, lazy excuse. We should and could have been doing this stuff while still being signatories to the ECHR, albeit, as you know, Liam, in 2022, I put down a private member's bill saying we should leave the ECHR. I was one of the first out the gate for that cause, but hey-ho. The Conservative Party has a seat, 119 seats for a reason, and I got my backside handed to me because we failed to stand up in the interest of the British people. And well done for Labour having some backbone. Well, Shabana Mahmood for having some backbone. Let's find out how much backbone Labour's got coming to future votes. But Liam, I want to get on to reform again because look, I think Nigel Farage has done a big speech today where I think again he's done another smart move here. He's outlining how, rather than raising taxes that Reeves is going to do, despite promising us she wasn't going to, he said, let's end universal credit for foreign nationals, including EU citizens. Let's raise the immigration health surcharge by doubling it. Let's reform personal independence payments, actually using a lot of sensible ideas from the Centre for Social Justice, and cut foreign aid by around 70%, and deport all foreign national offenders, in total saving around £25 billion, which we estimate will probably be around the black hole that Rachel Reeves has created for herself and therefore needs to fill off the backs, at the moment she intends, of British workers. But here, Nigel's seen, I think, an opportunity. Isn't this good from Reform, good opposition to actually react to events, come up with ideas that, frankly, I'd struggle for anyone to disagree with? In fact, based on what Labour said yesterday, you think they'll be nicking these ideas, wouldn't they?
Well, I mean, they already have kind of nicked some of them. You have to remember that foreign aid has already been massively slashed, and Sir Keir Starmer raided foreign aid to pay for our increase in defence spending. And again, it sort of links to what we were saying before. I remember back in 2015 when people, the Tories committed to 0.7% of all national GDP to go, and they were saying we can never renege on that. It'd be wrong. And Labour just did it. They just raided it to pay for our defence spending.
You made me shiver there, Liam, when you mentioned the Tories doing it. It made me shiver.
Yeah, I know. I just a quick side point. Lots of Conservatives feel as you do. They do feel betrayed because they were misled by the people at the very top of the Conservative Party. And I don't blame all Conservative Party people for that. But so, you know, the Labour government have created space already. They've admitted that some of these things can happen. And Nigel then has looked at this and said, well, let's go further. Let's do a proper job. And actually, I think that so the good people at Reform sent me this document this morning. It's an 18-page report full of data, tables, graphs. There's a brilliant executive summary at the beginning. And I think what you're seeing here is Reform moving into a new era. So for a long time, they've been great at vibes. They've been great at reading the temperature. They've been great at setting the direction. And now they're providing the detail. So this is an 18-page detailed document of how they would close that gap. And it's quite an extraordinary read. And as I say, you know, things like the PIP, reforming PIP, Labour tried and failed to do that. So it's not that radical. Ending universal credit payments to foreign nationals. When you poll people, they want to see that happening. Deporting foreign criminals, people want to see that happening. I think that would have a clear majority in the polls. So no longer can you have people saying, oh, Reform, they don't do their sums, they don't think things through, these are too radical. All of these things, to a degree, Labour have said there's space to do them, and here they are providing the detail to prove and the maths to prove that it works. So I think it's a really, really good, well-researched move by Reform, and people will be feeling it in their pockets after the budget. Well, we're filling in a few gaps there. We're not entirely sure what's happening in that chaotic budget yet. But when people start feeling
we're all dreading it, Liam. We're all dreading it.
So I am for one, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, great move by Reform, and I mean credit to their research team. They've done the research.
I agree with you. I've got to know some of the external affairs teams as well, like I know you have, Liam, too, and I'm quite impressed with the scaling up that's going on currently inside Reform UK, a startup that's having to scale up at a rate not seen in British political history, may I add, for listeners' sake. And I think sometimes that the media class here in Westminster forgets that you're there asking questions of Reform of a party that's basically had 2.5 years of really being established to where they are now, versus a Conservative Party of 200 years old and Labour Party of 100 years old. In fact, Liberals, you'd probably go back to 200 years as well if you were talking about true Liberals, although the Liberal Democrats don't seem to really understand what liberalism actually is, it seems, these days. But I think another interesting thing here, Liam, was Nigel Farage did a piece in the Mail where he's talked about his views on the BBC. And I think there is a lazy assumption that Nigel Farage wants to see the BBC burn and crash and cease to exist. He actually makes a very clear point that Reform UK do not wish to abolish the BBC. I think he rightly points out that the World Service is one of our best bits of soft power that we have in the world when it comes to producing news for other nations. Obviously, he talks about the need for impartial news as well in our nation, but says, look, in a world where we have other streaming services, why are dramas, entertainment, sports and education being provided at the cost of the taxpayer, not by those who subscribe, as you would do with any other channel? And makes it clear, again, he points at the fact that he's now got Nadine Dorries on his team. Nadine Dorries actually tried to get some of this stuff through, and there were Tory wets in the cabinet and Tory wets on the backbenches who I was ashamed to be surrounded by, who said, oh, don't touch the beloved BBC because I might not win my Lib Dem leaning voter. Well, guess what? You never were going to. And again, Nigel Farage, I think, has set a good blueprint here of where voters who understand the importance of the BBC brand, and I think there is a importance to the brand, but also understand the licence fee is out of date, out of touch, and it's time the telly tax goes.
I mean, so Nadine Dorries brilliantly tried to privatise Channel 4 and failed, but she at least had the right intention. But yeah, you're absolutely right that every time reform are spoken about in relation to the BBC, a straw man is set up where people basically say they want to destroy the BBC, they want to completely burn a treasured national institution. We can debate about how treasured the BBC is as a national institution, but he's never saying let's destroy it. What he's saying is that if you think the BBC is so marvellous, let it stand on its own 2 feet. If the product is that good, people will pay for it, okay? If you really think it's that marvellous, okay, people will tolerate ads, just like they do on ITV and Channel 4 and TalkTV and GB News. They'll watch the ads and because they'll think the product is good enough at the end of it. All we're saying is that the licence fee needs to go. It is immoral that we are forced to pay for a product that many of us do not believe represents us, and actually quite a large number of us thinks that works against our interests on a lot of social and political issues. Okay, so get rid of the licence fee, let it stand on its own two feet, and I actually think that that will benefit our entire media system, because no longer will you have a huge monolith, a big sort of monopoly at the centre of our broadcasting system, sucking away business and viewers away from the rest of it. It'll cause there to be better competition and a much better, much more nimble, much more flourishing broadcast system. I think it'll be great for British broadcasting. You just look at something like Netflix, which is selling British content all over the world, and people are happy to pay for it. Okay, and I think people will happily pay for some of the BBC content if they want it, and the other bits of the British media system will also get a boost because they won't have to unfairly compete against a licence fee funded sort of monolith in the middle. So scrap the licence fee. It'll be good for our media. No one's saying destroy the BBC, but if you really think it's as good as you say it is, let it stand on its own 2 feet. Simple as that.
Liam Deacon, comms communicating supremo, former head of press for the Brexit Party. Thank you so much for joining us.